Oman is probably the weirdest nation in the Arab Peninsula. Unlike their neighbors that have chosen to build massive high-tech super-mega structures and luxurious resorts, Oman has chosen much more traditional and less flashy architecture. They are also one of the very few nations in the Middle East that's mostly neutral. They have relatively good relationships with both the Saudis and the Iranians, and they even are chill with Israel, which for a Muslim-majority nation is indeed very weird. But undoubtedly the most interesting part about the nation is that despite them controlling one of the most important waterways in the world, having huge amounts of natural resources and immense influence over global affairs, almost no one knows anything about the nation. So in this video, let's break down their history, how the nation became an economic and political powerhouse, and most importantly, what the future is likely to hold for them. Oman's history goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. Unsurprisingly, with Oman being so close to the birthplace of Islam, it should come to you as no surprise that it was one of the first places on the planet to adopt the religion around the 7th century. Just like the rest of the Arabian Peninsula, Oman during those years was populated by nomadic tribes. The two main ones inside of Oman were the Hinawi, who came from southern Arabia, and the Ghafiri, who came from the north. But unlike the rest of Arabia, Oman adopted a simplified version of democracy, where instead of having a permanent king based entirely on bloodlines, they had a system to elect their leader based on capability and knowledge. During those years, the economy of the nation was split between two different sides. The first one was the coastal economy, because Oman sits at an exceptionally great position, linking East Africa with India and even China. Their ports like Sohar and Kalhat became some of the richest places on the planet. The other part of the economy was the interior. While Oman is mostly a desert, some parts of the nation, mostly here and here, are actually very fertile and allowed the Omanis to grow massive amounts of food in the middle of the Arabian Peninsula. While things stayed like that for a very long time, around the late 1400s, it started becoming clear to everyone that things were about to change drastically, and not because of internal problems or a slowdown in economic activity, but because the Europeans, who were mostly irrelevant up until that point in the global stage, all of a sudden had technology leaps and bounds more advanced than anything the Omanis had seen before, and because of that, their existence was under attack. More specifically, the Portuguese, who at the time were rapidly growing their power and influence, were very interested in monopolizing the spice trade between Europe with India and China. And with Oman being in the middle of that specific trade route, it was the perfect spot for them to conquer. To get it under their control, they send this dude alongside the Portuguese navy to conquer the nation. After they destroyed a few cities like Muscat, Sohar, and Kalhat, the Portuguese built massive forts along the coastline, and they officially controlled the coastal regions of the nation. Over the next 150 or so years, they controlled the trade route and made a ridiculous amount of money. However, the Portuguese never attempted to conquer the entirety of the nation. They only cared about the coast, and once the Portuguese started to lose more and more power, the people of the interior started to work together, and eventually by 1650, they completely kicked them out. But they didn't stop there. After liberating their homeland, they started chasing the Portuguese outside of Oman, and they managed to conquer some Portuguese colonies in East Africa. However, this kick-started the darkest and most controversial part of Omani history. The economy right after kicking out the Europeans exploded, and Oman overnight became a regional powerhouse. However, the main driving force behind this success was the East African slave trade. Once they controlled the former Portuguese colonies in East Africa, the Omanis started trafficking millions upon millions of people. It was so profitable that eventually the Omani leadership decided to move the nation's capital city from here all the way to here, mainly because the nation was making insane amounts of money in this region. However, by the 1850s, the slave trade caught the attention of the British, and after they threatened the Omanis to stop, they had no choice but to do so. And this decision completely destroyed the nation's economy. It actually was so devastating for their economy that even 100 years later, the nation was still stuck in the Dark Ages. Imagine this. It's the 1960s. The USA and the Soviets are fighting over who can get to the moon first. The personal computer is entering regular households for the first time in history, and technological advancements are improving the lives of everyday people all around the world. But in Oman, none of this is happening. The nation has 3 schools and less than 10 kilometers of paved roads in the entirety of the country, while at the same time the economy is so underdeveloped that the average citizen struggles to feed his own family. And worst of all, the nation is ruled by a tyrannical dictator who has completely cut off the nation from the rest of the world. In almost every single way, the nation looked entirely identical to its neighbor Yemen. Both nations were highly underdeveloped and extremely impoverished back then, but luckily for Oman in 1970, the son of the dictator carried out a coup using British support, and unlike his father, he focused on opening up the economy to the rest of the world. He built hospitals, highways, and and modernize the nation's economy, which finally brings us to the modern nation of Oman. The country can honestly be characterized by two main words. Those words are oil and Switzerland. The first word, oil, should be quite simple for everyone to understand. Unlike its neighbors, Oman has relatively low amounts of natural resources, and because of that, the nation's leadership is taking steps towards diversifying the economy by investing heavily into tech startups, tourism, and most notably renewable energy. But despite that, it's hard to ignore the fact that the nation was built on top of oil. The post-1970s economic boom can be almost entirely attributed to the nation's natural resources. The second part of the nation's success has to do with Switzerland, more specifically following Switzerland's footsteps by becoming a neutral country. It's one of the very few nations in the Middle East that has relatively good relationships with every other nation. Everyone from Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and even the Israelis are welcome inside of Oman, and oftentimes whenever peace talks are taking place, the preferred nation for the two sides to meet happens to be Oman, which gives the nation immense influence over the rest of the world. Anyways guys, click here to watch another video and have a great rest of your day.